Good morning, Toastmasters.
Good morning.
Are you having a wonderful conference?
Yes.
Yes. You have chosen an excellent place to be at 10 o'clock this morning. I have been chatting with our presenter. This is going to be excellent. How many in here have ever dreamed of writing a book? Woohoo! Here's a man who did not dream about writing a book. He spent many, many years as an electrical engineer and accidentally became a multiply published writer after his retirement. Today he is going to be presenting his story of hiking the entire Appalachian Trail, all 2,200 miles of it. He got started on this project. He started having medical problems. He had surgery. He spent 300 days recovering from surgery, which is why his book is called 300 Zeros, because every day he did not make the progress towards his goal of completing 2,200 miles on the Appalachian Trail was a zero day. He is going to inspire us to follow our dreams. He is going to inspire you to find that little book inside of you and make it happen the way he has. At this time, I will turn the stage over to Dennis Blanchard, our speaker for the day. Thank you, Dennis.
Well, good morning. I guess I can say fellow Toastmasters. The reason I say that is quite often I do this presentation to other groups. Toastmasters! Thank you very much, Gary. And I want to begin by asking a question. Does anybody know what that is? Slide rule. Back in my engineering days, when I first began, this was the tool an engineer used. We put people on the moon with these things. They were great. However, about 1972, 71, somebody came along with the electronic calculator. It was a major shift in how calculating was done. Now you could make errors out to 8 places. You couldn't do that with a slide rule. Excuse me. Now, publishing of a book, and I'm here today not so much to talk about my book, we can do that later out there. I'm here to talk about what you can do to publish your book. You see, I wrote a piece in Toastmasters Magazine in March last year, and it was called It's More Than a Speech. And you are Toastmasters, and I learned when I was out on that hike that Toastmasters is where you go to make, first of all, where you go to make mistakes. Seriously. You don't go to Toastmasters to have a perfect speech every time. You go there to be evaluated, you learn how to make mistakes, and then you correct them, and you perfect your speech making, and then you go out in public and you actually give real presentations. So I may make a few mistakes today. More than a few. Publishing itself. Well, first of all, let me back up a bit. The Appalachian Trail, I'll give you a quick summary of it. 2,200 miles from Georgia to Maine. And back when I was in my military days in the 60s, my brother and I promised each other we'd go hiking together when we get out of the military. And we'd go do a coast-to-coast motorcycle ride. My brother was killed in Vietnam in 1968. So it didn't happen. I did the motorcycle ride in 1973. And the Appalachian Trail was just always there haunting me. Finally, my lovely wife said, go do it. So in 2007, I set off to do it. Started in Georgia, got as far as Virginia, had serious heart problems, 6th artery heart bypass. Yeah, so the book is titled 300 Zero. Reason being, I have to take 300 zero days off. That's what the hikers refer to as a 0 day, because we're doing 0 miles. I got back on the trail and I finished all 2,200 miles. Yeah. I carried my brother's Purple Heart in my belly bag. So, in spirit, he was with me. And if you don't mind, I'm taking this off. I fry in these places. On your seat, you found a sheet when you came in, and this is notes from this meeting. So you don't have to sit there and write out all the web addresses I'm talking about or anything. This sheet is on a website. The web address is the first address you see at the top. Just go plug it in, and then you can click on all the links in here. So I've saved you all that note-taking stuff. Yeah, it's well worth it. Now, to get to the publishing side of things, 600 years ago, in fact, when I gave this speech a few nights ago, I said 400 years. I didn't realize. 600 years ago, monks were sitting in monasteries in dingy dark cellars with candles, writing books. Books were written by hand, usually very large things, works of art, scribbling in the columns, fantastic things. However, that was a costly process. The only people who could afford a book 600 years ago were kings, queens, and the churches. Nobody else could afford books. Therefore, lots of illiteracy. 600 years ago, a fellow comes along by the name of Gutenberg. Probably all heard that story. He modernized printing. He came up with a press that would actually press on the paper, make pages, make books, and send out the books much, much, much cheaper. Now, the problem is, at that time there were all these monks, and this technology put them out of business. In about 20 years. I can see what it was like at the time. They see Gutenberg's first book, the monks, they get it, they look at it. It doesn't smell like a book. It doesn't feel like a book. Oh, they all look the same. That's terrible. But 20 years later, they were history. There were no more monks writing books. That was a very, very, very large change in the technology of publishing. 600 years later, today, actually a couple of years ago, books changed again. Publishing changed dramatically. At one time, if you wanted to be an author, and you still can do it this way, the traditional route for publishing is you write your book, or you write up a really good proposal for a book, you write your manuscript, you find an agent, and that can be murderous. It can take years. Some people are lucky it doesn't take that long. But for most of us, nobody's ever heard of us before, it's a really grueling process. Then, after you get an agent, the agent has to find a publisher to publish your book. And that's a whole other layer of difficulty and challenge. I hiked that trail in 2007, and I was in the White Mountains, and that's what the article is about, the White Mountains of New Hampshire. And I was giving this talk at this shelter that's up there. People come up and they pay to stay for the night. They bring their own bedrolls, they sleep on a board basically. It's phenomenally expensive. I think it's $90 a night. Galehead Hut it was called. I got to stay there for free that night because they needed some of the true hikers, the people who are doing the whole Appalachian Trail. They bring them in and they do stay for work. All of my friends, there were several of us, right away they got to go clean toilets or whatever they were doing. There's no electricity there. It's very primitive. And they got to me and they said, gee, what can you do? And it's a very funny sequence in the book about what, I could run the casino or something. Yeah. So he looks at me and he says, our speaker didn't show up. They have speakers come in and talk about the environment, the flora and the fauna and all. Our speaker didn't arrive. Can you tell them about a through hike? I'm a Toastmaster. Oh, manna from heaven. Okay, so I said, yeah, I think so. I'll give it a try. I had about an hour to prepare. I did some quick notes on what I was going to talk about. I had an hour to speak. Just before the hikers start arriving, he comes back to me and he says, oh, I forgot to tell you, he says, we're from Canada, French-speaking Canada. I don't know if they speak English. Oh, okay. It turned out wonderfully. They all spoke English very well. I asked someone ahead of time if they could translate. The point here is, I took a speech, and I gave this speech to this audience. They were wonderful. And without exception, it was a larger audience than this actually, every single one of them came up to me either that night or next morning and told me, you have to write a book. Never crossed my mind. I'd written magazine articles over the years, but I had never written a book. That was the seed. I made the connection there. Here's a speech. Turn your speech into a book, a magazine article, a newspaper article. Don't let it just die there at your Toastmasters meeting. Take it to the next level. Take it out onto a publication. You can do it. Now, this big ground shift that I was talking about in publishing, what happened is, a couple of years ago, the iPad, even the iPhone, and Kindle, and all of these electronic devices came out. And you're all pretty aware of that. What you may not be aware of, that just about that same period, print-on-demand publishing came along. POD, it's called. Now, print-on-demand is an interesting technology change. In that traditional publishing model I was talking about, the agent and the publisher worked, and usually the author ended up putting this bill for the first 10,000 books. You know how much money that 10,000 books cost? Even at an author's price? Print-on-demand is completely different. You can work on your little laptop or computer, write your book, print-on-demand places like createspace.com, and I have them listed on there because that's who I use. You submit the files to them. They even have cover tools. It took me about 10 minutes, honestly. It took me 10 minutes to do that cover. And it came out really nice. Submitted it, clicked publish, and they sent me a proof copy. Proof copy is just the one you examine to make sure everything's right. It looks identical to what you're going to sell, except in the back. This may not even be approved. No, it's not. In the back page, they put big words, proof. The finished product. From then on, once you release it to publication, you can print one, you can print 1 million copies. Doesn't matter. They don't care. You can print 30 over the whole life of the book. They even gave me a free ISBN number. I didn't have to buy one. I can't say enough good about CreateSpace. Not only do they publish the book, they automatically, unless you tell them not to, they put it up on Amazon.com, the world's biggest publishing house, book house. I think they're selling about 80% of the books today. They do all of this. From clicks, I've never talked to anyone at this company. You just do things on the computer. You write your file, you submit it. So that's print on demand. And that's a whole new world for you as aspiring authors. You can take your speech and turn it into a book. If I buy these to sell it at this show, and I know I'm giving away my trade secret here, but I think I pay $4.85 a copy for these. The list price on them is $17.95. You set the price on this. The CreateSpace doesn't care. They also have a bunch of free tools on their website. Before you even write the book, you can go tell it how many pages you think you'll have, the size of your book, and so on. And they have a calculator that will tell you how much your book will cost you to buy. So you know how much I'm making on you if you buy one. The process is beautiful. As a writer, the only two things I do is once I write the book and submit it, I have to look in my checking account to see the royalties deposited every month. They do all the shipping, the credit cards, the defective books, whatever it might be. They handle all of that. I don't do any of that. It's a wonderful technology. Now, the other technology is, of course, electronic books. This is a Kindle Fire. I don't use this one all that much. I have 2 Kindles. But this is a Kindle Fire. It's a book. This is a book today. Doesn't smell like a book. Doesn't have pretty writing on the side, but it's a book. And I have to tell you, I was dragged into the Kindle world kicking and screaming. I wanted nothing to do with electronic books because I loved the smell of a book and the feel and all that other stuff. The reality is, I guarantee you within 5 years, the only books we're going to see out there are photographic coffee table books with beautiful pictures, children's books, that sort of thing. Standard reading books, I don't read paper books anymore, unless I have to because something gives me one. But this is a book today, and I guarantee you from now on it will be. This is the Gutenberg, 600 years later. This is the big change in publishing. A couple of pitfalls that you can run into when you self-publish. First of all, each and every one of you, unless you've been in the writing industry for a very, very long time, and you're an author, and you've had a lot of experience, I demand that you get an editor. Don't publish your book without an editor. Seriously, you can get in so much trouble. There's a ton of self-published books out there that are bloody off. There's no other way to describe it. Misspellings, incomplete sentences, they edited it, you wouldn't believe it. Now this book that I have on here, right on the screen at the moment, is by 2 authors that I love. Not twin sisters, 2 sisters that are hikers. And they have a book out there called Southbound. And it's the Barefoot Sisters. They hike the Appalachian Trail barefoot. Both ways. In the winter part. Amazing gal. Great book. I bought the paper copy of it. And then they had a special deal for a few days where you could get a free copy of it for your e-reader on Kindle. So I got a free copy and read it there instead of the print one. I've never read my print one. And this was published, I forget which publishing house put it out, but it's an electronic book, and it's loaded with errors. They used a font that didn't translate to electronic readers very well. It's got things missing, and it's got one of the worst things you can possibly do as a writer and submitting your book. And we'll be talking about how to do that. Here's a chapter, blah, blah, blah. Nice text. There's a typo on it. Turn the page, this picture. Turn the page. There's nothing there. The book is loaded with it. This is something that doesn't bother you in a print book, but this is the death knell in an e-book. You don't want blank pages. And there's a series of rules you follow when you write these things. If you do it properly, you won't have any blank pages. What they did is they probably hit a bunch of returns or blank page entries or something. They basically took their print book, converted it to an e-book, and said, that's good enough. So I've written them about it. I haven't heard back yet, but that's bad news. E-reader people look at that and they say, oh, these people don't know what they're doing. This is the more traditional Kindle, the older one. It's about a year and a half old now. I love this Kindle. I take it backpacking with me. I can carry 10,000 books in this Kindle. Try that hiking. This is just this massive change in publishing. I don't think most of us even realize yet that we're in a Gutenberg era when it comes to publishing. This is a big change in books. I love this thing. I can read, and as I'm reading, if I see a word that I don't understand, I just push the button, go up to the word, it'll look it up in the dictionary and tell me the word. I don't have to go to the dictionary. Unbelievable. I mean, this is changing. kids are reading more now because of these things. Yes, that's very good. Excuse me. I have any other toys here I wanted to show you? I don't think so. No. Okay. All right. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit, since, we're really limited with time here. I'll just talk a little bit about how to actually self-publish your book. First, we'll talk about the print version in paper. And I use CreateSpace. I get nothing from them for this. I just love them so much. But there are other good links out there. I don't know if I put it on the sheet or not, but there's also one called lulu.com, Lulu.com, and they also do hardcover books. CreateSpace only does softcover. So you might look into them. There's Lightning Source, I think it's lightningsource.com, another publisher, print on demand. One of the interesting things about print on demand is there's some shams out there as well. So if you look into some of the others, it's not Lulu or any of the ones I've mentioned, but there are others out there that will POD your book for $10,000. And they will. You'll get some books back and all, but you don't have to spend anything to get your book out there. My very first copy, the key, my first proof, cost me $4.85 plus shipping. And I had a book in my hand, as you see it. No overhead costs whatsoever. CreateSpace is fabulous. They gave me a free ISBN. You can use your own if you prefer. There's reasons for and against. Every copy I get, I pay $4.85 for. Quite simply. Excuse me. Right. Anyway, the book itself, when you submit the file, you format the book ahead of time, and they will take a PDF file. So you write your book typically in Word, and for the print version, you can use all the fancy fonts, and you can do all these things with headers and subheaders and subtitles and so on, tables of contents and everything, just like you would to submit it to any publisher. You submit the file, you do your cover, you click publish, and the book's in your hand. There are no overhead costs with this, other than what you bring on as self-inflicted costs. For example, I hired an editor. I actually had 3 editors go through this book. The first editor was an official copy editor. He went through it, and it turned out later I found out he was in the early stages of Alzheimer's. So he missed a few things, but he did a reasonable job. And before he did it, I had a humor editor go through. I like to write funny stuff. So I had an editor go through this just for humor, see where I could fine tune it, make it funnier and so on. She did a fabulous job. She made things funnier as I wrote them. And then because of the Alzheimer's situation, I had a third editor go through it right at the last minute before I was going to press. And that was my wife. She's a fabulous technical writer, and she did a really good job. So I got the book. I started shipping through Amazon and through CreateSpace. And one of the really nice things about print on demand is first of all, you set the price on your book. You set the profit margin, because CreateSpace tells you, or the publisher tells you what it will cost them to print it and what their profit will be. They give you a price right up front, the $4.85 that day. And then you can set the price anything above that. I mean, you could literally give the books away. You just pay the $4.85 and that's it, and make no profit if you were a non-profit. So you set your profit margin. Now, on a book like this, at an event like this, I'll make about $10 a copy. Stephen King gets something on the order of 15% of his books, and that's only because he's a big name in the traditional route. He sells lots and lots and lots of books, so he makes lots and lots of money. But the fact is, if he were an unknown author selling just a few copies, and at 15% through an agent and all, plus the agent, by the way, gets part of that 15%. so he ends up making 10%. So if you're doing print on demand, and you can put together a pretty good book, you can make a living doing it. Seriously. So you can take these speeches you do and turn them into something that you can ultimately make a living from. And if you're facing retirement, such as that's a really big issue. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Oh, I'm dying up here. Oh, the other advantage to print on demand, thank you. The other big advantage is the fact that the time element is so much shorter. We could start today writing a book, write it as quickly as possible, put it together, get it edited, and if we're really, really good, next week that book could be in print. It could be that quick. I came back from the hike, I had the heart surgery, I have a family history of heart disease. All of my uncles died, they were 40-something years old. I was 61 when I finished the trail. I was looking into getting an agent and getting the publisher and all that. And I knew I was facing usually 2, 3, 5 years before that book would even come out. And I'm thinking, with my family history, will I ever see this book? Print on demand is fabulous. I went to there's a writers club here in Sarasota, Florida, and there was a fellow speaking, and it was perfect timing. I showed up at the meeting, and he was talking about print on demand and how he wanted to create it. I was sold at that meeting. I went home right away and got my book out there in no time. Now, I've quickly talked about how to do a print book because that's pretty much your Word file, your Microsoft Word or Open Office. You take that file, you create a PDF, you put it up there. That's the only time that the CreateSpace people or whoever you publish with actually look at your file. They're not going to check it for content, story, spelling, nothing. They're just going to look at it to make sure it fits on the page, you formatted it so it fits in the book. And then they'll give you the go-ahead to send you an email and you're publishing. The electronic publishing for Kindles and Nooks and so on is a very, very different ballgame. When you write a book for an e-reader, the very first thing you do is rip out all of that formatting stuff. All of it. That includes fancy fonts, that includes table of contents, that includes endnotes, footnotes, all that stuff. That all goes away. Now there's a logical reason for that. It's very simple. These e-readers are all very different. The iPad, the telephone, small screens, the iPhone, the Kindle, the PCs. You can read Kindle books on your PC. They have a free application with Amazon. You download it and you can look at your Kindle books. So there's all these different devices out there that are trying to read your book. Many of them cannot deal with those fancy fonts and the other things. So what the electronic publishing industry has done is what they do is basically take your book and treat it as a web page. A very simple web page. In fact, they actually do read, most of them read in HTML, which is the language of web pages. That's what they convert it into. The formatting becomes a matter of all they want is a chapter title, the text, and if you have pictures, fine, you put a picture in and you put the caption in. Basically, that's all they want in your e-reader format. All the other stuff goes away because it turns out that e-readers are a very democratic process. The reader determines the size of the font. I can change the size of that font. And logically, if I change it to a larger font, my page size changes. And there is no page numbers in an e-reader. There shouldn't be. You could leave them in there, but they would look awful because they don't relate to the e-reader itself. So essentially, you end up just submitting a file that's very, very bare bones basic. Now, on that handout sheet I gave, there's a publishing electronic publisher called Smashwords. Mark Coker started it a few years back. And it's a pretty neat tool. What Smashwords does is you submit your ebook file to them, and they have this software thing they run it through. It's called the meat grinder. It takes your file, checks all the parameters, and spits back either a finished file ready to publish on an e-reader, almost any e-reader, or they'll give you a list of errors that it had, and you have to go fix those, and then put it in again and run it through a meat grinder till it's right. The beauty of the Smashwords concept is they, like CreateSpace and Amazon, they take that file and they submit it to all of these other readers that are less well known. The iPad, which is a well-known device, but it's also a reader. The iPhones, the Kobo, the Sony, the Nook. They will submit it to Barnes & Noble for the Nook. So this one tool, Smashwords, can take your book and put it out to all of these other places, and you get a great profit on it. Great profit. Now, I was talking about the print book where you pay $4.85 and all the copy. You don't pay anything for an ebook file, if you will. But what happens is when the customer buys a copy, the electronic publisher keeps some portion, and you get a big chunk of the royalty. Depending on the price of the book, there's stages. If your book sells for 99 cents, you get, I'm going to say 30%. It might be 60%. I think it's 60%. If your book sells for up to $9.99 or something, you get, I'm just throwing these numbers out, I could be very wrong. I think it's 70% or 80%. And most of the ebooks tend to run 99 cents to $9.99. There's also a load of free books out there. I mean, absolutely free. You download them on Amazon, or there's a bunch of free book websites. And I have to tell you, since the New Year's, I've read 38 books so far. I read a lot. And 35 of them were free. Of those, maybe 7 to 10, I don't recall, I didn't even finish. They were so bad. That's the way, they're free. You get what you pay for. However, I have to say, about 15 of them were fabulous books. Absolutely fabulous. I'm into nonfiction, and there were stories about people riding their bicycle from England to Vietnam and stuff like this. Fabulous reads. I was just taken by it. Now, many of these books are free for a short time. They put them out there for 3 days, maybe. And they get some number of people to download the books, and it's a great way to seed the market with some readers. You need readers. A book without readers is useless. And those readers, in turn, you sort of have an obligation. If you get a free book, put a review up on it. Or don't if it's terrible. But put a review up there. Do that author a favor. Return the favor. They give you a free book. Go up to Amazon. Yeah, I like the book. It was a 3-star, 5-star, whatever it was. So I do a lot of reviews too. But the point is, free books are like this one category. There's a bunch of $99 and $1.99 books, and you know what? They're the same books. The free books that have got a price on them now because they were free for 3 days and so on. Some of them are great, some of them are not worth 99 cents. So. But that goes back to what I said earlier. You need a good editor. You need to get that book when you first write it, that speech that evolved into a book. You need to take that and get it into the hands of readers that are not friends and family. That's the death knell. Do not use your family, do not use close friends as your proofreaders to read your first few copies. Get strangers, and they're easy to find. There's plenty and plenty of ways to do that. Excuse me. Oh. This is actually so cold I can't hold it. Excuse me. So, when you do an e-book as opposed to the print book, you strip all of that stuff out of there. You go into your word processor. You turn off any subheading, chapter headings. You could have the heading number 1. That's the one they want in there on your word processor. Don't use any heading number 2s or 3s or any of that stuff. Headings, text, pictures, any captions, and that's basically all you need to write your e-book file. The other gotcha that I have to warn you about is Microsoft Word, OpenOffice, many of these, if you put a photograph, a digital photograph, into that file, and you resize it to make it fit. Now, let's say you first put it in and all you can see is one little corner, it's so big. And you shrink it down, you fit it in there, and it looks nice in the file. And that's okay in the print version. You can get away with that. However, in the e-book version, you have to remember that the way word processors deal with photographs is they keep the original in a database that's stuck down inside the word processor. It's not visible to you, but they keep the original. And the reason they do that is because if you decide later that you shrunk it too small and you want to make it bigger again, it goes back to that original picture to get the right information. Otherwise, you start blurring it because you've lost information. So it always uses the original to work with the photograph. And that's fine and dandy, except some of the tools, for example, Kindle tool, what happens is if you try to, the Smashwords tool, if you try to submit that file back to them, it'll end up way too large and they won't accept it. So use a photo tool first to shrink your photos down. And that'll save you a lot of trouble. I wanted to talk about marketing. We're running low on time. So I just want to say, if you have more questions, I'm going to be outside afterwards. And feel free to hit me up for any questions you have about publishing or printing. I'll be here most of the day. And I think Jerry has a few words here.
Inspired. How many are going to go home and start writing? Fantastic. Dennis, thank you so much on behalf of District 48. Thank you so much for your gift to us today.
My pleasure.
There are not as many evaluation forms as there are warm bodies in the room. But if you have an evaluation form, please fill it out. I will be at the door to collect them. And let's give them some wonderful feedback, and we'll have you back. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes.
I have to ask you one question,
Sure.
if you would, please.
Sure.
Number one, I plan on doing the Appalachian Trail first February after I retire. But I need to find out one question. How did you replenish your food stock?
Who? Oh, there's plenty of places along the way.
You buy a lot, you go.
Oh, yeah.
I heard that a lot of people mail food along the trail.
Only if they have special dietary things, like they're vegetarians or they just like to have their own dried food, that sort of thing. So there's no need to. Even up in Maine, which I was really worried about, tons of food available.
And these stores are primarily located.
Well, the trail goes right through a lot of town, first of all.
Sure.
And if not, you hitch a ride or walk down into town. And convenience stores, supermarkets, it's all there.
So you never really had a problem?
Never. Yeah. Oh, you're welcome.
So you never had a problem replenishing food stocks?
Never. No.
Really?
Yeah. What was your caloric intake per day? Did you have an idea?
About 7,000, 8,000.
Yeah, I kind of figured.
Yeah.
All right, so 3,000 would be too small.
Yeah. I lost, I wasn't talking about the book, but I lost 35 pounds on the second leg and 25 the first leg. I put it back on at the surgery. So it was, yeah, I lost a lot of weight.